What's up? Vu of Vu Films back with another video, and today I'm going to be talking about Lumix versus Sony, or Panasonic versus Sony. I don't know what to call it, to be honest with you. Panasonic, Lumix, whatever. I want to discuss this is because Lumix is a hot topic right now, especially with the new release of the S1 Mark II and the S1 Mark IIe, and it's been causing quite a stir in terms of people switching from other brands, people accusing tube douchers of being shills. And I have been saying that, but I'm joking, and they all know that I'm joking. I'm going to try my very best to be unbiased here. I am a Sony user, a Sony D-bag trash fanboy who has been using Sony cameras since 2014 and who has only dabbled with one other system, which is Fujifilm, for about 3 months, and that's it. So this is coming from that perspective. Depending on who you are, most Lumix fanboys think I'm a piece of trash because even though I say 95% positive things about Lumix in my videos, that 5% where I'm a little bit negative, all of a sudden it makes me a complete 100% hater. Unless I am resting Lumix balls on my chin, I'm a 100% Lumix hater. So there's that. And to be quite honest, who I want this video to be geared towards is if you're new and you're just trying to get into video now, if you've been doing video work, content creation, but like on a phone or like an action camera or like a DJI Osmo Pocket 3 or something like that. If you're trying to get into a interchangeable mount system, you have a tough decision between all of these camera brands. And then you also have guys who are currently have a small investment into Sony. Let's say you have like one camera, one lens, and it's not going to be that big of a deal to you to sell those off to get into Lumix. If that's what you want to do, this is who I'm targeting. This is who this video is for. If you have been on any system for a long period of time and you have multiple lenses, multiple bodies, you should just stay into that system, because all of these camera brands now, you're talking about like Sony, Nikon, Lumix, and for a lesser extent, Canon, which is always trashed regardless. So if you've been shooting Canon all this time, you might as well just quit your job entirely, because you have a lack of judgment in cameras, which means you probably have a lack of judgment in everything else in life. I'm just kidding. If you're assuming you're just trying to get into it, or you're just trying to like upgrade your gear or something from, something else, it's a very tough decision with all these different options these days, and as you get better at content creation, videography, and all those things are getting more complicated. For example, this is my current setup right now. I'm a professional videographer. I do videography full time. Okay. So like I do wedding films, I do corporate films, I do random documentary stuff. And of course, I'm a YouTube douchebag trash tube doucher that shills camera gear for well below minimum wage. From that perspective, when I first started doing this YouTube stuff, I just kind of filmed whatever, not a big deal. The only time I really took my filmmaking seriously was when I was working with clients, and my YouTube was just, hey, let me just create content, and it is what it is. And to be honest, that's probably the best way to do things. But then, of course, as I started getting more into it, I started making things more complicated. So right now I'm outside here in my kitchen with a lot of reverb. So I got to make sure I have this microphone right here to isolate my voice better. It's a directional shotgun mic. It records everything via 32-bit float. So if I talk too loudly, it's not going to distort the audio. And then I could easily just put the camera on, and because for the most part my kitchen area here is well lit, I could just film it as is. Of course, I had to introduce artificial lighting because I wanted to make sure everything was nice and balanced. I didn't want to make it look overly obvious that I'm being lit by a light, looking like I'm on Fox News or CNN or something. So I actually have this new 300-watt LED light from Suray right now, bouncing off of a diffusion sheet to give me this key light right now. So if I turn it off, this is how the image would look like. As you can see, without the light, it looks like I've been tanning outside on the rice paddies for 12 hours straight. But of course, I could always adjust by taking off my ND filter. I'm currently using the Nisi Jet magnetic filter system, which makes it easy for me to take the ND off. Now, I am lit, but however, everything around me is completely blown out. I don't like this. I want to make sure it's nice and even light, looking all cinematic, filmic, trash. Put the ND filter back on, and then I'm going to go ahead and turn the light back on. Again, this is a 300-watt light going on at 100%, bouncing off a diffusion sheet. That's why a lot of A lot of these 60-watt lights these days, 100-watt lights out there, they're not going to be enough for you to light yourself properly in this situation. That's why you need a 300-watt light at 100% to make sure it's bright enough, because it's fighting daylight coming through all these windows. Depending on where you are in your filmmaking journey, things get more and more complicated as we go, okay? I could easily crank shutter, but I'm using NDs and all that stuff. On a standpoint of Lumix, right now, if I was getting into it, and back in 2014, when I first got into it, I looked at Sony. Sony was offering 1080 60p. It was a lot cheaper than Canon, which is the most popular thing at the time. So naturally, with my personality, I don't like buying into stuff that everyone else is buying into. I use Android, I don't use Apple, things of that nature. I went to Sony. And honestly, if I was not invested into any camera system right now and just looking at specs and reviews out there alone, and the fact that Sony is super popular right now amongst content creators, filmmakers, and all that stuff, I would be on Lumix right away. Lumix, without a doubt, is offering the most like specs and features than any other camera brand for the price. You know, I don't think there's any other camera like under $4,000 that can do photo and video very well, like as a hybrid camera. Like the only other camera I could think of that I know of, you know, other cameras available, you're talking about Nikon, you're talking about Canon, you're talking about Sony, which I know is like the Sony, you know, A1 Mark II. And the reason why like I'm jumping to like A1 Mark II versus the A7 IV is because I have an A7 IV right here, and it's a great photo camera, full frame, right? But if you're like a hybrid shooter and you want to do full frame video, and obviously you're taking photos full frame, when you want to do 4K 60 frames per second, your field of view is going to change from full frame to APS-C if you're going from photos to 4K 60p video. That's a huge problem for me, because if I was truly hybrid shooting photo and video, I want my focal lengths to remain the same when I switch back and forth. That's why I'm talking about A1 Mark II, because it's like it's only the Sony hybrid camera that can do full frame 4K 60 and full frame photography. And the reason why 4K 60 is important is because most people who do events, like wedding videography, we're gonna want that 4K 60 because you're filming things that are just happening right in front of your face. You want the option to be able to slow it down, you know, and with 60 frames a second, you could slow it down up to 40%. So like from the specs standpoint alone, you're talking about like 6K, 60p, you're talking about open gate, you're talking about great IBIS. Everything that Lumix offers, it just seems like it's the easy choice. And like I said, before you Lumix D-bags start hating on me, I would have likely went with Lumix back in the day. However, what I want to be is a different voice in your mind, because you are someone who is, again, either new or not fully invested into a system and you're looking to get into one. I want to tell you, maybe based on my biased Sony D-bag fanboy experience, I can tell you why you should still go to Sony instead of Lumix, even today, as someone who's not invested into a system yet. You know, are you looking to like filming on sets? Are you looking to, you know, shoot anamorphic? Are you looking to be shooting a lot, you know, 5K, 6K, things of that nature? You have to consider a lot of things: storage, ease of use, whatever it is. We all know it's objective that Sony is probably the best Sony autofocusing system. Right now, I have my FX3 sitting right here. I have an FX30 and I have an A7 IV right here. For this, I'm using my Sony ZV-E1, which is a $2,000 to like $2,200 camera that I've seen as cheap on sale as $1,800. It has the same exact sensor as a Sony FX3, which costs $3,900, and we can argue if it's overpriced or not. You know, that's not for this video, but you're getting the same exact quality as this camera, which I'm going to beat a dead horse, was used to film the Creator movie, which was filmed, you know, which was premiered on IMAX and everything in the theaters. Great movie, looks absolutely fantastic. This camera I'm filming with is the same exact image quality as the FX3, which is used on a full-blown Hollywood movie. So, and also another thing to consider, that movie was made 3 years ago, and movies these days, in terms of like image quality, hasn't really increased much in the past 4 or 5 years. People still mostly only have 4K TVs. Your phones could only handle up to 1080p to maybe 1440p or something like that. And when you're doing things like vertical shooting, if you're doing vertical content for like Instagram, TikTok, or YouTube, that's only 720p. That's even less than 1080p. 5K, 6K is definitely overkill, especially for content creation. That's without considering just the additional storage size and just like speed of editing those files, whatever it is that comes with using those types of files. As I was thinking about this and I was thinking about how I use these cameras, is obviously I have my professional rig here. It doesn't really matter how big it is, really. Like, clearly I have rigged it out here. I have a cage. I have like all these different attachments. I have a V mount to keep it battery powered. I have a monitor because my eyes, 41-year-old Asian piece of trash. So my eyes are going. I need the monitor. So that's why this set up like this. But I also use my cameras for filming family. We go out to like different events. We go to, different places as a family vacations. And I always want to film my family, my kids, the same way I film my clients. And I'm always using the Sony ZV-E1. Why is that? The size. So when you look at these Panasonic cameras, you're looking at, and again, guys, this is a perspective of like a dad, content creator, videographer. I'm not filming on sets and all that stuff. So shut your ass up before you start saying stupid stuff on the comments. The A7 IV is probably the closest camera that I have in terms of size to like a Panasonic S1II, S1IIe, and even this camera is smaller and lighter than that. Has EVF and all that stuff. And I'm telling you right now, the Sony ZV-E1 and even something like the FX30, I have cages and stuff on all my cameras just for protection and when I want to rig it out. But the fact that there's no EVF makes the camera so much smaller, so much easier to pack. And the fact that something like the Sony ZV-E1 is so light, I don't mind taking it everywhere. There's so many guys, including the tube douchers who has been recommending the S1 Mark II. These guys are always talking about taking their DJI Osmo Pocket 3 around, using their phone instead because, bringing around their camera is so so troublesome and so rough and all that stuff, hard to deal with. So they're just using the Osmo Pocket or their phone, using their iPhone, freaking like shooting log, raw and all that stuff because it's smaller, lighter. I'm telling you, if they had a Sony ZV-E1, they wouldn't even bother with that stuff because Sony ZV-E1 is so small and light. The biggest reason why everyone should stay on Sony or use Sony instead is their lens ecosystem. They just have so many different types of lenses. Like right now, this is like a 35mm 1.8 A7R4, and the size of this lens is so tiny. This is a FX30, APS-C, and I have an APS-C lens right here. This is the Sony G15 f1.4, which is like roughly a 23mm equivalent on a full frame. But like 15mm f1.4, look at the size of this thing, it's tiny. And then if I want something bigger or something like, professional use, whatever, I do have the 28-70 f2. And only Canon and Sony has anything close to this, where you have a 28mm, you go all the way to 70, and it's a constant f2 aperture, which is very similar to shooting a prime, except you have a zoom instead of just having one focal length. And then if you want even smaller zooms, Sony has a 24-50 G lens. And I know Panasonic has just released the 24-60 f2.8. And of course, all those Lumix fanboys out there is, holding those things up like this, showing you how nice and light it is, as if they're trying to like suck on it. And if you compare that to the 24-50G, which has already been released by Sony for a while now, the 24-50G, although 10mm less or whatever, it's still lighter, smaller. And, I don't have both of them to be able to compare image quality. But if you look at just specs, the Sony one has more elements, a more rounded aperture according to the specs, with like the extra elements and blades and all that stuff in there. So you're looking at a more carefully crafted designed lens versus this 24-60, which is larger, heavier. It's just, Sony is just a lot easier to carry around. And you look at this, oh guys, it's not that big. It's all, they're all like small hybrid cameras now. Guys, you don't understand. When you have kids like me, 2 kids, and you're taking them around, and all you want to do is carry around like a small messenger bag, like this wandered messenger bag, or like this Ulanzi messenger bag, or just small backpacks, and you just want to be able to like put in a lot of gear, but not only gear, but you have like other stuff too. Like with my kids who are younger, You know, I have diapers, I have snacks, I have like a bunch of other stuff in my backpack. I think you get heavy really quick. Like I don't care, you know, how in shape you are or whatever. Over a period of time, that's going to weigh down on you. And if you're going to carry around these cameras, it's going to be very cumbersome. And that's what happens when you go on vacation. All of a sudden you bring your camera and everything. When you actually go out, you're like, you know what? I'm not taking this camera. It's too much. I'm just leaving it home. When you have a camera that is not only light, small, but at the same time have the same capabilities as a cinema camera, you're going to want to take that every time. And I'm telling you, every time I've used like my phone or something instead of my camera. One time I brought my ZV-E1, forgot an SD card, and I have to use my phone when we went to like this petting zoo. I was completely regretting it. You know, because I wish I would have had my camera here. Better quality, better lens options. You know, you could shoot a lot more intentionally versus just being stuck on this 24 millimeter wide angle where like everything is in focus. You have to get really, really close to have it, you know, any type of depth of field or anything. A lot of times tube producers talk about ergonomics, they're talking about feel and all that stuff. Honestly, guys, you're filming, you're gonna have like a cage on it. That handheld stuff is more like for photographers, right? But then when you're talking about actual situational, like filming stuff, you might have that on gimbal. The ergonomics doesn't matter. But when you're carrying things in your bag, the majority of the time, the weight and all that stuff, it really matters. So not ergonomics is not just about how it feels in hand, but actually like the weight and the size overall to carry it around with a neck strap or something walking around. And, you know, we could sit there and look at the specs, right? 4K up to 120 frames per second, full frame, 10-bit 422 S-Log3. You have H.265, H.264, small file sizes to use. Sony is still the ideal camera for content creation, you know, running around filming, parents out there, you know, trying to film stuff for their kids, just like ease of use, and you know you're gonna get great quality. And yes, the S5 Mark II X and the S1 Mark II has slightly better dynamic range than like the FX3, A7, you know, A7S3, ZV-E1 and all that stuff, 13.1 versus 12.4 stops. Again, 12.4 stops is still good enough to be used for an IMAX cinema feature. So take that into consideration. I, for one, don't mind sacrificing a little bit of dynamic range quality, a little bit of video sharpness or whatever for freaking just something smaller and compact that I know I'm going to carry around. Because if you have this big camera with a big lens, what's the point of having that? All those abilities, when you look at it, you don't want to carry it around because it's just big and bulky and you're going to use your phone. So if you're going to get a camera that you know that you're willing to carry, and when you use it, you know you're going to get some of the best image quality, you know, the market has to offer. Sony has like the best options in that regard. And the absolute best one, in my opinion, is the Sony ZV-E1. We can sit here and say, okay, well, Panasonic has the S1IIe, which is like a cheaper version. It's like $2,500, not too far off from the ZV-E1. But again, it still has the viewfinder and all that stuff is still a different size. Again, file sizes and 6K, 8K and all that stuff is still not like a format that is used often. The content, if you're making social media content, most of that stuff is gonna be viewed on a phone, at most a TV that is 4K only. And I know there's abilities to like crop in, there's ability to, you know, a lot of people say if you shoot open gate as well, you get to like reframe for vertical, which to me, open gate, really quick, I did this short the other day to illustrate how open gate is overrated for like social media recropping. LUMIX fanboys, open gate D-bags are gonna straight lose their shit when I tell you this. You need to switch to LUMIX. Open gate for social media usage, as in reframing to vertical, highly overrated. Open gate is just being able to use your entire sensor to record video. Most cameras, when you film, it allows you a 16:9 image. Let me show you. So the top and bottom of the sensor is actually not used. So when you take the photo with the typical camera, you're gonna get a 3:2 aspect ratio using the whole entire sensor. Clearly, you'll see only in 16:9 that you're missing a little bit of the top, a little bit of the bottom of the sensor. And in theory, filming in open gate, typically a 3:2 ratio for, let's say, YouTube, and you have this horizontal video, you can make a vertical video and use that for YouTube shorts Instagram Reels, TikToks, whatever, and have more resolution, have more image to use. Sounds fantastic, right? But if you look at your damn YouTube Shorts, IG Reels, and TikTok, top and bottom of the Reels with all the overlays and shit, like there's really no use for that extra footage. So if I were to just crop a 16:9 image, the same way I cropped in a 3:2 open gate footage to get vertical aspect ratio, as you can see, I'm missing top and bottom. Once I load this onto Shorts, IG Reels, or TikTok, are you really going to notice that I'm missing a little bit of the top and bottom of the footage? Open gate for vertical cropping. Oh my God, Sony, it rat. A little bit overrated. However, to be clear, if you're trying to shoot anamorphic, open gate is great because you get to utilize the whole sensor, which means when you de-stretch the anamorphic, you're gonna have more footage overall instead of being like super cropped in. I'm not trying to explain that whole thing, but just know that open gate is better if you plan on using anamorphic because you get more overall resolution. If we're talking about hybrids, you want to take pictures and stuff, you have to think contextually, like how you're going to be taking these pictures. 12 megapixels from a Sony ZV-E1 or something like that is perfectly enough if you're trying to just take photos for thumbnails. Most of the time, I'm just using my video for thumbnails, just screenshot it. And there's the same method I use when I'm taking photos for my family. I don't take photos anymore. I'm always filming because I want to film, I want to capture everything. And then if I want to edit some type of recap of our trip, recap of my kids' year, or maybe do like a birthday video for like 3, 4, 5 years, I want to have the video footage. And then from the video footage, I just screenshot that 4K footage, edit it, whatever, and I just send it off to my wife so then she could post it on her social media. And if I wanted to print it, no problem printing 5x7, no problem printing like 10-inch canvases, which I'd have, and gave it to my parents. So there's like so many options you could do with 4K footage in terms of screenshotting them and getting photos out of them. I have actually even done this for clients. I was asked to film and photo a birthday, and this birthday was just so fast paced that I just said, screw photo. I'm a videographer, like first and foremost. I just did all video footage with 4K, and then I just screenshotted them and I sent them screenshots of my video for photo, and the clients were completely happy with it. So like you have to think about all these things before you fully invest into a system, because yeah, right now Panasonic has like the best video features, right? However, a lot of these video features are like overkill stuff that like only like serious like filmmaker dudes on sets and stuff is truly going to consider. And I know some of the guys were like advertising them for like content creation, yeah, for like them, but for the vast majority of people, okay, 4K is more than enough. And probably what you really want to do is, what you really want to have is just ease of use, ease to set up, because we all know the longer something takes to set up, the harder something is to use, the less likely we're going to do it. It just takes too much time. I literally had 30 minutes to set up, film the video before my son comes home from the bus, which is right now. And I set it up real quick. I brought all these cameras out right here and I did it. Okay. Like there's so many options for you to rig things out to make them bigger if you are going to, film something more serious, right? Like if I wanted to, I could film an entire wedding film, client film, whatever with the Sony ZV-E1. If you wanted to, and you have the talent, you have a script and all that, you could easily film a feature film with the Sony ZV-E1 if you rigged it out and everything like that, or just as is. So, before you spend a bunch of money investing into a system, you got to really think through what you're going to be doing the next year or two, where you're going with all this stuff, and can you grow with this camera? And clearly, Sony's track record, new cameras they come out with new features, new lenses, constantly upgrading their autofocus system, which in the FX3, Sony A7S III is still a better autofocusing system than what Panasonic is offering right now, 2025, in the S1II. And the Sony ZV-1 is even better than the FX3. And that's part of the reason why I'm always using it for social media, because I know it's not going to mess up focus. So not like the FX3 does, but I just know like Sony ZV-1 is like, there's no way this camera is going to mess up not focused on me. So I hope this video helps somebody. Again, not hating, not trying to be like, all camera brands are good these days, guys. I'm just trying to make a case for Sony still in 2025. I hope it helped. And until next time, lighten up. Hey man, what lens is that? I'm working on a review for this 7 Artisans 24mm f1.8 lens for Sony E-mount. Oh my god, Sony, it's rat. You need to switch to LUMIX s1II right away. Bro, I'm not about to switch to a different camera system for perceived upgrades that I'm actually not going to make use of. LUMIX have open gay. I might make use of that once a year. It have the best IBIS. Sony IBIS in the A7S III and FX3 is actually very underrated, and the newer cameras, the IBIS is vastly improved. It do 6K. This video right now playing on everyone's phones is 720p. It will have R-Log-C, much more cinematic. S-Log3 is also used in cinema, so it has better dynamic range. That dynamic range is quite nice, but even that is not enough for me to sell 4 of my Sony camera bodies, over 20 lenses, for the next 2 months dealing with lowballers on Marketplace just to switch to a different camera system. And then a month later, some new camera comes out with 8K, 120 frames per second, freaking 69 stops of dynamic range, iBig, in-body image gimbalization. And then what am I gonna do? Switch again? I'm not sponsored by Storyblocks, Squarespace, Artlist. Ain't no one got money to be on gas like that. What you mean, gas? Gear acquisition syndrome. You don't need to sell all that, you just buy. What are you talking about? Let me show you. Use the pay bukkak at B&S. Asian love this gag because you don't have to pay tax. My guy, it sounds like you have a different kind of gas. Sign up for my how-to switch camera master. Bro, my bad, you don't got gas, you got straight liquid coming out of your ass.